on Facebook. All right. Hey guys, I am back and I am live on Talks with Alex again. So come on in. What I need you guys to do is share and like. Um, Share, like, comment. Comment if you like what you're hearing. Say, yeah, I agree. Ask questions so that I can shoot them to the panel. We have a great panel of people tonight. I am very excited about every last one of them. It took a long time to try to get one of them was just like absolutely yes. Well, two of them was absolutely yes in the beginning, and then it took me a little while to find the other one. But the other one is really important to me because I wanted to get this perspective. So I'm just excited about what's going on, and I think this is going to be great. All right. So school, we are going into a space of where we are about to try to reopen schools. Different counties and different states, different townships all have different plans on how they're doing this. I think that we all need to really engage and really try to figure out how we are going to get this done. I mean, there are a lot of stakeholders. There are a lot of people that are trying to figure out how they could be a part of the conversation. And so I felt like I could bring people in who all have very different point of views to add to this conversation. All right. So I have I have two parents actually, but one is a school board director in Erie. Another one is a parent here in Philadelphia whose child is in private school. And then I also have a high school student who is at one of the schools here in Philadelphia, just to get all their perspectives and just have a conversation. So let me go ahead and introduce our guests. Again, like, share, comment. I want to hear from you. Actually, if you're here, shout yourself out inside the chat so that I could, in the comment section, so I can know that you're here, so we can see what's going on. I want you to be engaged in this conversation because this is really going to kind of give us some different perspectives. So the first person I have on tonight that I want to introduce is Mr. Chitarra Titus. Tonight, and I am ready to get into this conversation with them all. Okay, so first, I want to just say that I am such a fan of every last one of you right now because I'm so glad that you decided to come on. I am especially a fan of Tyler. Tyler is like royalty in my eyes. I've been watching his career ever since he's become elected. I celebrate you and how you represent my community And I am so glad that you are taking us to the next level. All right. So now that I've finished being the groupie, let me just go ahead and ask the first question. All right. And I want to kind of direct it to Tyler, I guess. We'll go with Tyler first. Tyler, these conversations have been really, really crazy, right? It seems like school boards are going back and forth constantly about if they want to do virtual learning, if they want to do some sort of a combination of it. I know you guys actually your district. So can you kind of tell me what's happening around these conversations right now?
I think it's important to note that in an ideal situation, we would be remote. We would be all virtual. But we also know that we're not in an ideal situation and that things aren't equitable. We know that internet isn't equitable. We know that there's gaps in learning within the curriculum that leaves out just different learning abilities. And so the conversation is moving around, and as the numbers shift, we need to be more amenable to bridging gaps that are definitely becoming more and more. And I think no matter what choice we make, and this is exactly what I said on the board. No matter what choice we make, people are. This isn't. Unfortunately, we're putting people.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you, Chitarra, like, what was your thoughts when you realized that your school was going to work on bringing the children back and go through the process that you went through? And kind of talk to me about what happened as you guys were going through this process. Kind of walk me through the steps of how you were feeling, and then after you guys went through the process, because from my understanding, your child is actually back in school now.
Well, we had a meeting. So her private school is really small. It's 30 children or less. So we had a Zoom meeting with all the parents who were participating. So by that time, maybe 15 parents were participating in the Zoom school because the other children and their parents didn't attend school once it went all virtual. And we took a vote on how the process should be. Should children come back now? Should they come back at all? Should we arrange play dates with them? Myself and about 4 other parents were concerned about our child's social skills because my child is a social butterfly. So Zoom just wasn't working at a certain point in time. Like, yeah, she'll do the work, but she wants to socialize. Like, she has 1,000 pictures of her friends in my phone on the computer. She, that's just what she wanted to do. So it was affecting her mental. So we decided that since everybody wasn't ready to come back to school all at once, that we would do it gradually with some play dates, some scheduled play dates where everybody could build like an immunity to each other. And then eventually, over a couple of weeks, they went back to school. It's still not full time, but it's at about, I think, 6 hours a day where they're all together, but there's no new children. So it's always the same children all the time, the ones who've been around each other all the time. So we know that if there is a possibility of them, contracting COVID, it's from one of us, one of the family members due to traveling or so. But they've all built some type of immunity to each other from being around each other for so long.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Josiah, let me ask you a question. When they were discussing about you going back to school, well, first, how was the transition for you when you guys decided to go all remote learning in March?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Um, how was the transition for you? How did you feel when you heard that you all were going to go to remote learning in March?
Well, the transition was difficult
I
because
can't
you
hear
go.
you.
Oh, can you hear me? Oh. The transition was difficult because you go from learning face to face and then you learn online. And sometimes the internet isn't always reliable. So you may be late to class, or you may not get a chance to turn in an essay at a certain time. And well, freshman grades matter. So it was difficult trying to keep up with everything and not having any like teachers' actual help. You get what I'm saying?
Let me ask you a question. So the technology that you guys were using in Philadelphia public schools, right? How was that going for you? Like, how did you like the technology? Was it easy for you to navigate? What was it like?
Being that I am a teenager, we spend most of our times on the phone. It was pretty easy for me to navigate, but it was hard to keep up with, if that makes sense. It was hard to like remember, like I have to charge my computer. I have to be up at this time to do Zoom. I have to do, instead of just getting up in the morning, getting dressed and going to school. It was more work.
It was more work for you.
Yeah.
Wow. And then, so now that you finished the semester, you're finished, I'm saying semester, now that you finished the year, right? Because it's been a long time since I've been in high school. Since you finished the year, how do you feel about going back to school? How does knowing that we are going through a pandemic, how does it make you feel that they're saying that when they told you that you might have to go back to school in the fall?
Well, I wouldn't want to go back to school in the fall because so many people come from all over Philly, and we all go to this one school, and you never know what's going on at home or how many people that person interacts with daily, and you can't be too sure. And the coronavirus is very dangerous, and I feel as though we shouldn't be put at risk.
Oh, wow. Okay. So let me ask you a question, Tyler. Now, when you all were discussing going back to the school, did you consider the resources that would be in the private, the charter, and the public schools? And how did those decisions go when you were having those discussions about what and how to do when we start up the next school year?
So I think this is a phenomenal question because charter schools are essentially funded through the public schools. So it complicates a lot of things. And so when we have charter schools that are also private, or they're able to keep a smaller population down, they're funding and they essentially build the public school. So they're getting some of our resources that we have within the public system. So even though we have small, limited resources, they become even smaller. And when we look at what's going on in an urban district versus a suburban district, those resources are also very different. We know in an urban district, we tend to have lower socioeconomic. We tend to have families who have been, the cities have been gentrified. And so we're having families who are working 2-3 jobs to support. And so they don't have the same access, and their kids are being forced in situations, and they're having to interact in ways that maybe suburban schools aren't having to because of the inequity gaps there. And so when we look at these resources, it's not just about what can our school offer, but it's also like, what does our school help prevent? Because some of these kids, they're not having any other safe space to go to. And so you have to start taking kind of those things into consideration because the rest of the world hasn't stopped. In fact, it's put a higher demand on those who are working in the service industry, who are working in the front lines. And those tend to be our minority populations, those of us who are marginalized. We are not given those promotions, we're not given the jobs, and so we tend to be in those frontline jobs. And so when you have more of that going on, you have to weigh it differently. And the truth is, we're around 12,000 kids in our district, and that's very different than when you go just a few miles away and they have 6,000 kids. So we're at almost double, and a lot of those parents have jobs where they can work from home, and a lot of our parents don't. And so it starts to pull on resources very, very differently. So I think that really does weigh into the conversation. And as we were just talking about before, it's very different in an urban setting versus a suburban versus a rural area. I would ideally love to be more remote and have our kids in those spaces, but it also is putting them at a high risk as well too.
Yeah, it is putting our children at a very high risk. And I think that we still don't know what the long-term effects of the coronavirus will be. We see what the short-term effects are on older populations and populations that are at risk health-wise already. But we don't know what the long-term effects of the virus will be. Let me ask Chitarra another question. Chitarra, do you recognize or do you notice that have you talked to any of your friends who have children that are going back to school, and what do you get the feeling of other parents? What do you think the feelings are of other parents who aren't necessarily afforded some of the options that your private school is affording your child?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't hear you well.
So what are you hearing from other parents who may have children in school that don't necessarily have the same option as your child does?
Oh, what advice would I give to them?
Yes.
I would give them. Are you speaking health-wise or as far as resources-wise, like he was saying for the school?
As far as resources-wise, so and let me just say this because I'm not sure that I think there is something wrong with your sound. But what advice? I mean, not what advice. What are you hearing from other parents? Are you hearing what are you hearing from other parents that do not have the same options as your child in the private school? Did you get that?
Not really. I think it's the device that I'm using. So you wanted to know what options? Oh, that sounds better.
Hold on one second. I am.
What options? I'm not sure how to answer your question because I only heard part of it.
No worries. I'm sending it to you now. There you go.
Did you see device? Hold on.
Did you see my question? I sent it in the private chat.
Yeah.
I mean, private school.
Oh, here we are.
Yeah, there you go.
You hearing from other parents that are sending their kids to private school. Oh, I gotcha. What am I hearing from other parents that are not sending their children to private school? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Better question. Thank you.
No.
Okay, so from what I understand, the resources of the Philadelphia school are very, very limited. So I still am up to date on the public school as well because I wanted my daughter to go to charter school this year instead of the private school, just for cost wise. But they're supposed to be doing A and B days, and then the rest of the days they'll be home. So if you're, for example, like if your child went to school on Monday, then they would go to school again on Wednesday, and then the other 3 days, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, they will be home, and they will only be allowed to be around those children that are in their class. And the only time they're like allowed to go outside of class is to go to the bathroom. So lunch and everything is held with those children in that class with that teacher all the time. So they're only around the same people all of the time. But a lot of the parents were concerned about what is the process for getting into the school because they, with the washing stations, and then they were talking about the stations to wash your shoes. And like you had to step in the solution with your shoes, you got to wash your hands. Everybody has to wear a mask. They're like, what if the children don't have a mask? Then they're supposed to provide a mask. And what if the child takes off the mask? Because they're younger children, like kindergartners. So they're like, what happens if my child takes off my mask? And they were saying that at a certain age level, I guess 5 and below, that if your child takes off their mask because they can't breathe, they won't require them to put it back on because they're uncomfortable. And you don't want to put a child in a situation where they're uncomfortable and they're in the class trying to learn and they can't breathe with the mask on. So
yeah,
a lot of parents are just concerned. The majority of the parents I know whose children do not go to private school, they're saying they're not sending their child to school. They're going to take the full virtual option, and the child will just be home for the entire time period because they're also considering they don't know where the other parents and families have been during this quarantine time, because they have people in the news who are outside all the time. They're like, what if your parent is one of those people who are just outside all the time, or somebody who works on the front lines, and they don't know, they're not in a small tight-knit community like we are in the private school, where we know where everybody works and what they do and where they've been. So they're just concerned, and they're concerned on how the child will be graded too. I know that the Philadelphia school system came up with something called COVID report cards, where they're supposed to adjust grades according to the child being home during COVID and working on Zoom. How were you able to grade the homework and the classwork? And so it's developing over time, but it's kind of messy. Most people are saying no. Like, I got an email from the state representative, and she's saying, like, yes, the schools are open, but over 60% of the parents voted no, they're not sending their child to school. So they're trying to figure out what's the best process for this, because the children need social skills. They need to be with other children for a social environment, and plus the sanity of the parent too. How you going to keep working from home and your child, and then some of the jobs are asking us to come back to work, come back to the office. So how are you going to work in the office and your child's not at school, your child's at home?
All right, so let me ask you a question, Tyler. What is the state doing to support the process that you're going through, and do you think that it's sufficient?
No. So I don't think it's sufficient. I think that we are blessed with Dr. Rachel Levine. I think she has been phenomenal in her guidance. I think that the federal government truly failed us in this situation. But when it comes to resources, period, the state has done a really poor job with equity and funding. And so we know that the poorest funded schools are our public schools with the highest rates of Black and brown students. We know that, and that's not even a debatable fact. We know that. And so those are also the schools that are going to need the most resources right now, especially with technology. When we have parents who are able to keep their kids at home, if we have to go, if we go back into a red state where our red phase, where it's not able to keep our kids safe in school, that we're going to be essentially screwed because we don't have access to these resources that we need. I would have liked to seen our state officials fight for us a little bit harder, fight for the public schools a little bit harder here, and have given guidance a little bit quicker. I know this is an ever-evolving pandemic, but it has definitely been difficult to navigate when we're just every day. I feel like it's every day we get new information, and I know that it's hard, and the state is getting new information every day. But I really feel like the government on a whole really dropped the ball here, and because of that, a lot of families and children are being put in harm's way because adults wouldn't make.
I'm gonna ask another question too, because this kind of pushes you a little bit. So I know that they are debating right now in the Senate the CARES Act, all right, another package, and I believe that education is actually a part of that package. Can you tell me what you think about this package that is about to come out, and do you think that do you know of what they're trying to put in as far as education is concerned in this package, just out of curiosity?
I don't fully know all the way. I'm just full disclosure there. But what I do know is they have tried to tie it to, being in person, having face-to-face classes, which is ridiculous. Threaten funding by putting children and parents and family in harm's way. Like, that's just ridiculous. And I also know that they're offering a lot of CARES Act stuff to businesses and organizations who have profited quite a bit off this pandemic. And for them to get bailout in a situation where public schools and charter and even private schools are like scrambling to make things safe for children and families, speaks to what a capitalist nation can do to the most vulnerable. And it really just disregards life, and it is putting profit over life, and we're seeing that play out now with this pandemic more than ever. So I think it's just really disappointing. It's really disappointing.
Okay. So, Josiah, let me ask you a question. What do you think that your school could do to make you feel comfortable with going back in the fall? What do you think should happen that would make you feel comfortable?
I think a way that my school can make me comfortable with coming back in the fall will probably be to know that they support us and that they are keeping in mind how many of us there is and how many of us there is in a room and in a space. I just want them to keep in mind basically my life, like Mr. Tyler is saying, like to keep in mind that I matter and I want to be safe and I want to go home and I don't want to get sick at school because school is supposed to be a safe place. So I just want them to make school as safe as they can.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that you will participate in the activities that you participate in when you go back to school? If you go back to school in November of next year?
I would not. I
How
wouldn't.
is this? Go ahead. How has this changed your life, out of curiosity, outside of school?
Well, being in school, I was a very social person, but now that I'm not in school, I'm not really socializing with any of my school friends. I spend most of my time in the house because I don't want to get sick. And my mom's not super strict, but she doesn't want us to bring anything home. So I spend a lot of
Mhm.
time in the house and I don't really socialize except for on social media. And sometimes that can't be a good thing for your mental health. So
That's a really good point. I'm sorry that I'm asking you questions that I didn't tell you I was going to ask, but like, how are you managing your mental health as a teenager in a world where we're dealing with a pandemic? How are you dealing with that, out of curiosity? I mean, like, I know that for me, I mean, I live alone, and so it's been crazy for me because I'm used to being out and about, going to networking events, going into my office, and doing all of these things that I can do. But like, how is it? How are you maintaining your mental health while you're inside the house, and what are you guys doing as a family to maintain that?
well, we have a lot more movie nights now. But as a teenager myself and just on social media, kids can be cruel. And now that we have more time outside of school, like more time to ourselves, sometimes you can just walk off from your parents and your family and do really mean things on the phone. I've seen people say really, really rude remarks to people just because they have the spare time to.
Okay, all right, I hear that. So, Miss Craig, what are you doing inside your household to help now that you guys are kind of stuck in there? I mean, I know that now your child is going to the summer program and they're in there part time. What are you doing to try to make sure that your child is still learning and that y'all are remaining and keeping your sanity during this time?
Well, for learning purposes, we do a lot of. She gets homework, so I make sure she completes the homework, and then some puzzles, some crossword puzzles, some outdoor activities, riding bikes, skating, running. Keep the mind strong, just to keep her sanity. Of course, cleaning, and I found a schedule works for her. So if she knows, like, okay, well, I have to wake up at 7 a.m. to get dressed and eat cereal and watch cartoons and get ready for, even if it was Zoom, get ready for virtual school, then she felt a lot better than everything being sporadic. She felt like she was back on a normal schedule, would help her, keep her sanity. She's like, okay, now it's 3 o'clock. I have to do my homework, and then at 5 o'clock we go ride the bike, or get some exercise. And 7 o'clock we eat dinner, and then she's like, okay, it's bedtime. She was like keeping a schedule to help her keep her sanity.
Okay. And so, Tyler, let me ask you a question. How do you think this is going to affect education moving forward? One of the questions that I asked one of the teachers last week when we had this conversation was, I know that we are in a capitalist country, and you talked about economy and stuff like that. But we know in capitalism we look for efficiency, right? And if we have a lot of advocates out there that want to transition public school to completely charter or private school, right? And with this online learning becoming more effective, and I know that we're going to do more strategies to teach teachers to become more effective at teaching students online. How do you think that this is going to move that movement forward or backwards?
So I think that public education is going to be fundamentally different from here forward. I don't think that we will ever go back to where we were. I think moving forward, we're going to see all public schools have some type of remote or cyber option, and they're going to need to. They're going to need to stay up, just attuned with whatever is going on. Families don't work this, they don't work this traditional schedule, and so we need to adapt where they are. My my fear is that we do move to a more privatized education, and the education becomes an industry, much like what we saw happen with the prison industry. It has moved into it's a profit, and that is one of my biggest fears. Is that we have, now we have an Amazon public education. Like that is what I'm afraid of. And so, in order for us to stay on top of that, the public arena has to stay up with the remote and the cyber. We have to meet students where they are, and we need to frickin' update the curriculum. It's about time that we start telling true history, inclusive history, and adapting it so that students are learning and they're being able to benefit from what they're getting.
Yeah, let's talk about this equity thing, right? Because that was another thing that came up on the conversation last week is that the public school teachers didn't necessarily have the training resources on how to use the technology that was being used for the students, right? And so they had to create a group themselves that trained the teachers around them on how to use that, right? So that becomes an equity issue, right? Where we have teachers in public schools who struggle to use the technology and to be effective at teaching. And then we have, on the flip side, when we're talking about communities that are kind of disenfranchised already, now having to have consistent, stable internet and equipment that is up to date, that can maintain the virtual learning, right? So how are you guys working around that whole equity issue and out in Erie?
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to partner with some of the bigger businesses like Verizon, even Sprint, AT&T, or like our Erie Insurance, places where we know that a lot of our populations work, and maybe they're housed literally in the middle of the city. Could they be disbanding internet? Could they become a virtual like giant hotspot for us? What can we do to get hotspot equipment into the hands of the youth so that it doesn't become the parents' job? One of our makeshift things that we did is we upped the internet, the bandwidth within all of our schools. So worst case scenario, parents could drive to the parking lot, which is also pretty unrealistic, in like really speaking. But it was like the best that we could come up with at that time. And so that's, I think, what we're trying to do right now. As far as training the teachers, we're trying to unify a platform, trying to plan ahead so it's not this like crisis reaction, but we actually have a thorough plan in place that the teachers have been trained on and they'll get training on. And how do we equip them to move that forward? So it's just not like this haphazard thing like, oh crap, we've got to get our hours and our lessons done. What do we do? But now more of a thoughtful plan. And I think that is some of the resistance parents have to doing a remote learning, is they think it's going to be like what it was in March. And March was this thing because because of where the federal government was, it left all the individual districts in this complete state of crisis. And so it won't be what we had in March as long as we're doing the right planning. And one of the things we're doing up here in Erie is having like this three-prong approach where we have the cyber school that's this asynchronous, the parents can log on whenever they're ready. We have the synchronous that they can log on. So it's essentially us live streaming a teacher for those who are doing remote. And then we have the face-to-face so that we have all those things going at the same time. So hopefully it goes off without too many glitches like it did in March.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Jaizia, because that raises another question for me. How was the interaction between your principal or people who did corrective type action type stuff, right? You were just telling me that the kids have a lot more time to be on social media, and so a lot of the cyberbullying and stuff like that is able to happen. What is happening as far as interaction with people who help maintain the order in school? Is that being do you see that being maintained while you guys are virtually learning?
No. That, well, teachers do the best they can, but they can't really control you if you're not not verbally, physically in front of them. It's hard to control somebody that's farther away. And being that we're in the screen, I can say and do whatever I want right now. You couldn't really be able to do anything because, well, you're farther away. You're not with me. So teachers,
Mhm.
I watch teachers struggle with that a lot.
Yeah. Okay. And then another thing too. Did you? So the work that you were able to do, right? What did you find it to be harder or easier? And I know you were saying that it was a little bit more difficult to keep up with the assignments. But were the assignments more rigorous or more engaging online, or was it a little bit of was it difficult to understand instructions that were typed to you or sent to you through the internet?
It was kind of difficult to understand instructions, being that you couldn't actually you couldn't get an answer right then and there. If you were to ask a question, you have to wait until they got a chance to email you back or respond to you back on Google Classroom. So it was like now you're just waiting for an answer to do homework or work or anything that's needed to be done right there in the moment, and it was difficult.
So let me ask you a question. There was no actual communication while you were on screen. So I know that you said that you were on Zoom calls, right? Was there like direct interaction during those calls? Were you guys using the chat features and stuff that were actually in the Zoom calls during your class sessions?
Well, it all depends on the teacher and how into it they are. If the teacher's really into it and telling us like this is what you use, this is how we're doing it, and it also depends on the class. I'm sorry. Like for math, she was really interactive, and we learned like this is what you need to do. Or for reading, it was more of a like you do this on your own type of thing, and it all really depends on the teacher and the subject.
Okay, so certain subject matters were more interactive than others. Let me ask you, did you get the full scope of arts and creative type stuff? I mean, like, do you have any types of art like classes where you do like music or some sort of debate or something that's outside of just rote learning?
We do have music, but it was hard because in music class we actually play instruments. I'm sorry, and now that we don't have instruments, what are we doing? So there really wasn't a music class. There wasn't too much sheet work that we could do surrounding music, being that we play instruments.
Oh, wow. Okay, so let me ask you a question then, Shatara. When your child went to remote learning during the March, how what did they get the did she you have a daughter, right? Did she still get the full scope
Yes.
of all of the creative type things outside of the rote learning that she needed while she was in the remote learning type phase?
No arts.
STEM.
Any kind. Nope. No creative. Anything. She did have projects where she had to present. So like the most creative project she had was she had to pick someone historical to dress up as and learn about them and then
Mhm.
present as them, which took some time. But as far as like the normal arts that they would do, like they paint on a canvas or they would do like some threading, like beads to make bracelets, the music, when they play the drumming, none of that, which is what they would normally have in school every day. So they had to come up with a way where we could participate with them
Okay.
without overwhelming ourselves because they know that we're still working during that time, even though the child is in school.
Okay, that sounds good. So then it brings me back to you, Tyler. How are we changing how the parents and the teachers engage each other during this remote learning phase? And what are we doing to differentiate how lessons are taught between separate classes?
Those are some great questions, and I will tell you, I don't think the direction's been very clear. Even just looking at our district, I don't think we've moved into a space where we need to be with that. I think a lot of our parents have felt pretty left out and left in the dark with all of this. I know, we just changed, we just voted on our plan on Monday, and so that's not a lot of time for distribution, right, to the parents. We need to over 10,000 students and only 2,000 responded. So that lets me know right away that's a huge gap of people that we missed. That's over 8,000 people that didn't respond back. So what are we doing as a district to bridge those gaps? How are we get the information to the parents, and how do we earn the trust back from the parents to know that they can talk with us, and that we're here to help and we're not here to condone and condemn. I'm sorry, condemn. And so that's really important, and that really matters. I don't think we've done a phenomenal job of supporting our parents, or I'm sorry, our teachers as they connect with parents. I don't know that we've provided all the platforms that they need. And it's hard too. And I think we often want to blame parents for the lack of communication when they're struggling. They're struggling. And especially within this pandemic right now, a lot of our parents don't have, they're just trying to keep, them and they're safe right now. They're trying to keep a roof over their head. And so when we hold them at a level of standard that we're not holding other people who have access to resources to, it becomes very frustrating. And I know sometimes I can sound like a broken record, but it is this, quite frankly, this is a race issue. This is a race issue when it comes to public school, and we need to talk about it, and we need to stop shying away from that. And we need to stop blaming parents who can't get, who aren't meeting our standards. Me as a white, very privileged human, we've got to do a better job. It's our job to bridge the gap. We've got to stop putting it on the person who's oppressed and marginalized. And I feel like that's what is happening right now in our district. All districts, not just ours, but a lot of districts are dealing with the same thing. You are on mute.
I figured that when we brought you on this conversation, thank you, that we could kind of talk in more general terms, because I feel like you are a microcosm of the larger issue, right? I mean, I think that the issues that you are dealing in your school district, I'm sure that all the school districts are dealing with some of these same issues. Let me just ask another question. When you guys were making some of these decisions, did you get a chance to hear from teachers and how they felt about the more micro things that are happening in the classroom and some of the things that they saw? What were some of the feedback and if you did, what were some of the feedback that you got from teachers, or maybe even some of the principals?
So it's very split. I will tell you, it's very split. A lot of our teachers do not feel safe returning. They do not feel like their voice was elevated. They feel like they were forgotten through this process. Other teachers, especially ours within special education, don't feel that they were able to meet the needs of the students being in a remote situation. And so they wanted to open the schools back up for those of us, our students who need more support and more resources. There's conflict, I think, even amongst the teachers, and on how they feel and how the comfort on going back on this. I think that there is a little bit of gatekeeping in the sense of who can work from home and who can stay remote and who can't. In that being that we know that not everybody has access to the same medical provider or same kind of medical care. And so to have one doctor who will do whatever the person asks, and I'm not dogging anybody, I'm just being honest. If we know that some doctors are going to write some, because they have a personal connection, or they value this person, or somebody else who might have switched doctors won't have access to those same things. And so now there becomes like this vying for who gets to stay home and protect their families, who's going back to service the kids. And so I think that we're building tension in that sense.
I hear that. And so do you think that this is going to change the way that teachers interact with schools? And do you think that this is going to drop the median age population for your teachers that are serving in the schools? Because Absolutely. Do you see that there's an age there's an age divide in who is willing to come back into school and who is refusing to come back?
I do think that there's an age gap with that, and those who are in high risk, those who have students who are not, like their children maybe are in other districts, and then there's just like that's too much exposure to too many people. We have parents who have children who are living in intergenerational homes who are caring for their parents. So maybe they're not at risk, but they're going to bring it home to their parents that they're caring for, or their own children have health risks, and so I think. I mean, what I'm projecting is we're already at a school nurse shortage. We can't find, and this is a nation struggle, but especially in PA, we don't have school nurses. We're coming back from a pandemic, and schools don't have nurses. So I don't know what we think is going to happen when we're trying to pull in teachers. This is going to be we're going to go through a teacher shortage. We don't have substitutes. You're going to tell me that a substitute, once somebody finds out you've got a COVID outbreak, that they're going to come into the school? Everyone's going to be fighting for the same substitutes. And so I don't think we've thought about this. Maybe we can start out coming in face to face, but how quickly are we going to have to go to remote? And how are we going to address these? And we keep going back. And transportation. We haven't even talked about transportation and getting kids on buses. How dangerous that is. And there's a bus shortage.
The more at risk. Yeah. So let me ask you a question. Jaizia, do you have a nurse in your school?
Yes.
You do.
I do.
And how many nurses do you have?
You have to share the nurse. Does the nurse bounce around?
Yeah. How many nurses do you have?
I'm sorry?
How many nurses do you have in your
I
school?
have one nurse.
And how many kids do you think are in your school?
A lot. I know there's a lot of us.
So you have one nurse to service a whole school full of kids. Now, this is a nurse. This is not a doctor, right?
Yes.
Right. And do you think that this nurse is probably a professional at COVID? Like if there was some sort of an outbreak, like Mr. Tyler was saying, if there was do you think this one nurse would be able to handle all of the students that got sick?
I don't think she can handle us without a pandemic.
And then without a pandemic. And then let me ask you a question. At some point when you were in school in March, did you guys start wearing masks? Did you see the nurse wearing a mask at some point? Were any of the people in school wearing masks or gloves, or were you guys washing it? Were they telling you guys to wash your hands more often or anything of that nature?
No, everybody was taking it very light at first.
Okay. And so, but now, now that you're dealing with it, even with when you're seeing the stuff online, do you see have your teachers talked about it? Have they kind of updated you guys on the things that you should be doing in your homes to try to make sure that you stay healthy? Have you even seen or heard the nurse give you any type of instructions on how you should operate while you're at home?
No, I've only got my classwork and that's it.
Okay. We're going to go back to Miss Chitarra. Let me ask you a question. What type of information are you getting from the school about the pandemic and how to stay safe? Are you does your school have a nurse?
Our school does not have a nurse. No, we do not have a nurse. But we do have, we had to answer a questionnaire on what procedures to follow if something was to happen to your child. So of course they have the teachers are trained, in basic first aid and CPR. So if something was to happen to your child, the teachers there are able to provide nursing, type of things that you would go to the nurse's office for. But if it exceeds past, like a cough or a sneeze or something that they can control, we had to answer questions like, how would we want them to proceed with that? Would we want to be called, and that way we take our child to the doctor or the urgent care, or would we want them to go to the emergency room? What would the precaution be after that? But I did used to work in a school.
Okay.
I was accounting for a school years ago, and well, not that many, 2017, but the nurse was part-time. It was a part-time nurse. So she would come to maybe about 1 o'clock or so. And that was pretty much it. And she didn't have any resources. She maybe had Band-Aids, gauze, and some tape. And that's probably it. And then if your child had asthma, she had the asthma pump to make sure that, if they have an asthma attack, she's able to administer that. But she fought for supplies. She's like, I'm basically sitting here unable to do anything for children because y'all don't provide me with supplies. There's no supplies, and I'm not here the full amount of time to actually provide nursing capabilities. And she was a nurse. It's just there was nothing there for her to give service. Was she gonna wrap your child in paper and Elmer's?
Jaizia, let me ask you another question. One more thing. Have you had a chance to speak to your school counselor since you've been on the quarantine, or talk about your schedule or what your future is going to look like in high school?
No.
Do you know what classes you're going to have to take next year when you go to the 10th grade?
No, sir.
So let me ask, so then I'm going to bring it back to you, Tyler. Let's have a conversation about school budgets, okay? I'm trying to unmute you. I think we're both trying to unmute you at the same time. Let's have a conversation about school budgets, because we know now, right, that school budgets were already, that's always the first thing on the chopping block, especially when we live in a state with a predominantly Republican legislator, and we have a president and a Congress, well, not a Congress, but a Senate that's Republican, right? They're already talking about they want to cut or slash the unemployment compensation from 600 and drop it down to 200 added to it, right? So they are, when we talk about public education, that's the first thing we want to chop. So we already have school districts that are struggling financially, right? And then we're going to talk about, if we're going to bring the kids back or consider doing something, we have to talk about PPE, masks, more supplies for washing their hands, and trying to organize them in a way where kids are in smaller classrooms. So that means we're going to have more staff for that, hopefully. And then now we're talking about nurses, right? And even guidance counselors. And these people are already, there's a shortage of them in the schools already. How do you think schools are going to have to adjust as far as budgets are concerned to try to accommodate for a pandemic?
So this is what I foresee happening is, I don't know how long schools are going to be able to last without having to make furloughs. I don't know how long schools are going to be able to last without having to close schools within the district. I don't know how long we're going to last without having to cut sports, arts, music, because those are the first things that have to go when we are looking to provide an education in a safe space. When we're looking at buildings, so let's just take Erie for an example, right? We got a $14 million boost in our budget. I think it was like 3 years ago, right before I ran. And everyone was talking about how that should have helped us. We were already like 30 million behind. That didn't even close the gap in our deficit of looking to bring up. We haven't been able to, this was the first year when they've been able to do work on buildings. We had snow, like it would snow into some of our school classrooms. Wow. We have curriculums that are outdated. We're the most recent president. I think it was like somebody said like Bill Clinton was the most recent president in some of our books. And so we're talking about like our students we're having to be forced to make payroll and get the teachers in, but then we can't provide the buildings that are safe. And so our budget right now is looking for safe, warm, and I think comfortable schools. And it's not like we're looking for bells and whistles. We want to make sure that our kids can come into buildings that aren't going to harm them. And that's what we're talking about with public education. So people think that, we're not spending money correctly. They have no idea. We have been so underfunded for so long that we are continuously playing catch up. We're continuously playing catch up. And when you look at school nurses, for example, what they get paid in a school nurse, and then not only do they have to have their degree, they have to go on and then get an additional credential, and they make maybe a quarter of what they would make anywhere else. So if that same nurse went to a hospital, she would make 3 times as much, or he would make 3 times as much than they would working for a school. And they're not, and you just heard, as Ms. Craig said, they don't have the resources. They're there because they love children and they want to help children, but they're not fully staffed. And then they've got 10,000 kids, maybe in one school they've got 2,000. How in the Hades is one person going to support that many students? Not only do we have a pandemic, but then we have the normal flu, we have the normal tonsillitis, we have the normal stomach bug that's going to go around. We have all these things that are going to happen. And so when we look at budgets, it's not because schools don't know how to do it. It's because they've been so underfunded for so long, they can't even catch up. They can't catch up. And these are just Band-Aids that we're handing. And then there's an inequitable funding formula for when you look at charter schools and public schools, and it's pulling from one to pay the other. I believe in parent choice. I believe parents should have charter school options. I just don't believe in the way that Pennsylvania has funded them. Because it hurts them. Don't even get me started.
No, my thing is this. I know the public school, charter school struggle, right? And I know how public schools are basically just trying to put tape and Elmer's glue just to hold the building together, right? Mm-hmm. And so now we enter and then the school districts are going on these processes of selling and shutting down all these schools and selling the buildings just to be able to stay above board. And then we have a president that's doing all these tax cuts and doing all these things to deregulate and giving money and subsidies to oil companies and things that really don't matter in the grand scheme, when we have children who don't have nurses in their schools, who don't have guidance counselors, and who are struggling just to maintain internet to stay online. And we haven't even talked about children with disabilities and how they are functioning in this space where, when you're talking about special education and some kids who need to be face-to-face with a teacher, especially the ones who've now entered into the general population, and they probably really can't keep up with the virtual learning. So this is a crisis on so many levels. And how we're going to be able to open up the schools that are already struggling and to add on their budgets all the things that they're going to need to be able to maintain a safe environment for the pandemic. We're not even talking about safe environment for the other things that are just the basic needs. This is a very expanded conversation, and it sounds like we've gone beyond just the coronavirus. There are basic needs that are already not being met within the school systems. There needs to be a larger conversation around funding of the schools so our kids can get quality educations, because we can't send all of our kids to even some of the charter schools are horribly maintained. So like we at some point we need to really have a serious conversation about education. And hopefully this will kind of push some of those conversations. Hopefully people will not use the coronavirus as an excuse not to have these conversations, but there needs to be a larger conversation had around education. I just want to say this, and then because we got to end, it's 8:58, and I was just made aware that they told you this was going to be only 30 minutes, Ms. Lee, but you've been such a intricate part of this conversation. So I want to give you guys the ability to tell us what you're doing. Is there anything that you want to leave us with before you leave, a positive word or something that you would like everybody to know that's been watching, and how they can connect with you and contact you if they want to use or ask more questions, or even use a service that you may be offering, okay? And so we will go with Miss Jaizia. Like, I'm not sure if you really should or share your social media, but what you can do is just leave us with a positive word. Yeah, leave us with a positive word, a thing that you think that we should all leave with. When we think about Jaizia, what should we think about leaving this conversation, okay? You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I was so used to you doing it.
No worries.
One thing I would say is that children, we need to be properly educated because we're the future. And if you want your future to look bright, we have to be properly educated. Because if we're not, then we're going to end up with a really bad economy. So, yeah.
Thank you. I guess that wraps it up, right? Chitarra.
How can I top that? That was great. That was like putting the nail right in the coffin.
Right.
But my social media that I actually use, I use Instagram, which is queen_budget. Of course, it has on there my financial advisory and accounting skills. But if you have other questions about education as well, the main thing, you can ask me, but my main source of advice is the pandemic isn't going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, there's been pandemics historically, epidemics and genocides and everything over courses of time where, illnesses or wars or anything come across the, diminish a certain amount of the population based off of race or sex or gender or whatever. So as long as with the illness, you can at least build your immune system and, and take care of yourself and try to build your body enough to, even if you come in contact with it, it's able to at least fight it or repel it.
Yeah.
So that way you can deal with life in a normal manner. So I would say to at least do that. But as far as education wise, I'm wondering what the qualifications of being a teacher is going to be moving forward. That's what I'm wondering. Because now, when you interview for things, they like want you're almost like an actor or actress. You got to get on the video and present yourself in a nice, meaningful way and, show them what you're about as if you're on, TV. So I'm wondering, what is it going to be like to become a teacher now? Are they actually going to make you go get your certificate and get the credentials, or are they going to care that you can present as if you're on Khan Academy, and can engage the children using a whiteboard screen on Zoom and getting your message across to the point that they received the lesson? That's what I'm starting to think now.
All right. And Tyler?
So I think what I'd like to leave with is this pandemic has shown us things that we can unsee. It has highlighted the inequity gaps that we already knew existed, but we were choosing not to listen to. So we are at a spot in our nation where we can do better. Our Black students, our Latinx students, our students who are living with disabilities, our queer students deserve us as adults to do better. We can do better, and we know how to do better. And I fully believe that we as a nation are going to pivot. We're going to pivot. And we owe that to especially the Black lives who have marched in front of us and who have given us the path. They have laid out the solution. They have laid out the solution, and we now need to. It is our job, those of us who are privileged, to pick up and to do it. Not to speak for, not to speak in front of, not to speak on behalf of, but to use. And I'm sorry for swearing, Miss Lee, for our damn privilege in a space that makes a difference. That we elevate the voices who have been screaming from the rooftops since day one founding of our country, and we can do a better job by doing that. We really can. And I'll leave you everybody with this: wear your damn mask and wash your damn hands, because I want to get back to some sense of being able to communicate, like being in community with people, and we can't do that until this is showing the interconnectedness of our nation. We are interconnected whether we want to be or not, and we need each other now more than we ever have. So we can do this if we listen, and wash our hands. You're muted, Alex. There you go.
Yeah.
Let me ask you another question, Miss Lee. Do you pay attention to politics or anything that's happening with politicians?
I do.
Okay, so then let me ask you a question, okay? What do you think the top 3 issues are right now to you in this country?
To me, as a Black young lady, or like just in general? As a Black young
I
lady?
mean, in general. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As it could be to you as a Black lady. It could be you in general. What do you think the top 3 issues that a politician right now, the president, should be focusing on?
How much in debt we are, because we're definitely in debt.
Oh.
And yes, we're in debt. And also just the community, just our community as a whole. The world is a horrible place right now. We treat each other crappy, and nobody supports anybody like they used to. Everybody's just at their lowest point right now, and I feel as though if the president was just a little bit more supportive, and he had a little bit more action and like the Black Lives Movement matter, or he just was just there more supportive, or just like, I don't know, I feel as though if he put his foot down and he just helped us, that we will be better as a country, as a community.
Okay. All right. So thank you guys so much for being with me. Thank you so much, Lee. I'm a fan now. So I'll be asking, I'm gonna be asking your mentor about you all the time to see what you're doing. You live in Philadelphia, so I'm gonna try to get you back on my show probably later on this year so we can talk about your experience. Thank you so much, Chitarra. I will be seeing you again, I'm sure. No, Tyler. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. You are such an icon in my eyes. Thank you. Thank you.
And
Thank you. Thank you.
Miss Lee, I want to just say this to you is that you had said that children are our future, and you are not our future. You are our right now. You are our right now, and I am so sorry that so much of this has fallen on your shoulders, and that you've had to use your voice in ways that's not fair to you. But you are phenomenal, and it's not tomorrow you're leading. You are leading right now, and I hope you know that.
You are so great. He just really is because he's so aware of everything.
Yes. See, it's all for all those people out there that are saying that these young people don't know what's going on. Like right here is our future. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Chitarra. Thank you, Jaizia. I'm going to go ahead and close out. So I'm going to take you guys off, and I will definitely have you back again. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
So bye, guys. She said our debt. Yes. Yes. You gotta love the Black girl magic. She is amazing. That's our future, y'all. That right there is our future. And you know what? Sometimes I think we get caught up in what's going on around us, and we forget sometimes to ask the next generation how they feel about what's happening, right? Because at the end of the day, all of us are doing what we're doing for them. Like, I mean, we're talking about the schools. We're talking about the giving the money back for the CARES Act so that we can help take care of our children and make sure the future is better. We talk about climate change. It's for them. We're talking about the civility she said civility and the way people treat each other in communities. We are talking about all these things. I was so glad to hear her perspective. And so I think that this is what the time that we really need to have a conversation about schools. We don't have guidance counselors. We don't have enough guidance counselors. We don't have enough nurses. And it's all going down to the fact that we're not paying the people who take care of the future of this country enough to do it. We expect so much from teachers. We expect so much from the schools. We expect so much from the superintendent, but we refuse to pay them what they are worth. We are having this conversation about frontline workers and how they need to be paid hazard pay to do all this extra work. But do we talk about the teacher who is dealing with your child that you are really starting to get to know now, that they're in the house with you 24/7, that most of y'all really just want to send back to school because you're tired of having to go to work and deal with the crazy child that you didn't realize was as bad as they are now, that they're living with you 24/7 while you're trying to work. So let's really get into it. Teachers are dealing with your children on a mass scale on a daily basis. You have sometimes upwards to 30 kids in the classroom, right? All doing their own thing, whether they be teenagers or children, right? And we're going to pay teachers what? We have one high school baby nurse, they said, for a school that has hundreds of kids in it. And they're paying them less than they would make in a hospital. And they're taking care of the future of this country. They're taking care of the most prized possession that we have here in this country. And we're not even paying them enough. And then we're saying that they need to go back to the school so they can take care of your kid that you are getting tired of because you have to work. And we have to have conversations about pay for the teachers. I am just, hey, look, the public school system, they're holding it together with tape and Elmer's glue. The nurse had to buy stuff for herself to help take care of the kids. And she's already getting paid less than what she would make at a hospital. Okay, I'm gonna get off my soapbox. Look, y'all, I love you. Follow me on social media. You can follow me on Instagram. It's j.alex.deering. Of course, I need you to go to my like page, like it on Alex Deering on Facebook. and comment, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I changed it now. Now it's Talks with Alex. So you can go to the YouTube channel, find Talks with Alex. Guys, I need you to search it, go on YouTube and find it, because the reason why I need more clicks and likes. I'm going to share it on my Facebook page so you guys can know how to redirect to my YouTube channel, because I need it to be more searchable so you guys can find it. But thank you so much for following me. Thank you so much for tuning in at 8 p.m. every Tuesday. I know I've gone over a little bit now, but guys, thank you for listening. Stay healthy during this pandemic. Come out of this thing better. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.